The first item on the agenda is House File 558, Representative Frederick's bill. Representative Frederick, would you like to move that House File 558 be laid over for possible inclusion in an omnibus bill?
That is my motion, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Frederick has moved House File 558 be laid over for possible inclusion. Did you want to move the DE3 amendment at this point?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And is this just to put the bill in the shape you would like?
The DE amendment kind of reorganizes some of the language, and then yes, I'll just say yes.
Okay, thank you. You can describe it when you describe the bill. Representative Frederick has moved the DE3 amendment. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the bill is in the shape you would like. Representative Frederick, please describe your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. So in the state of Minnesota, early voting looks like it's early absentee voting. We have to put your ballot in an envelope, and then you can turn it in at your county seat. What this bill seeks to do is during an 18-day period prior to Election Day, have true early voting where you go in, you fill out a ballot, you put that ballot in a tabulator, you get the little notice on the tabulator saying it was counted, you get your sticker, and you can walk away, just like what you can do on actual voting day. That is the core of what this bill does, is just allow during an 18-day window for people to show up, vote in person, and have their voice be heard. The reason that is 18 days, if that seems kind of like a weird number, some of it started at 30 days. We wanted it for a month. Got feedback from the counties. Initially went down to 3 weeks, but then the request was that if 18 days means it starts on a Friday, and that there are 3 weekends leading up to the actual election day itself. Other provisions within this bill outline the hours that are needed to be open during the week, and then it also includes one weekday evening until 8 p.m. at the county's discretion, but it has to be the same weekday for both weeks leading up to Election Day for there to be some consistency in the hours. And then every Saturday leading up to Election Day, and then the Sunday before Election Day itself is also mandating that the hours be open. There are those within the state that it doesn't matter what day that we open up early voting, they will be there. But we know that as we get closer to Election Day itself, more and more people will show up to vote, which is why there's that increased hours in adding that Sunday before Election Day. And then one provision that working with the stakeholders was on the Monday before Election Day is the busiest day of voting within the counties. And so taking into feedback that we got from them is that we are allowing, with the DE amendment, we are rolling that back to 3 p.m. on the Monday before Election Day itself, which gives the counties time to be able to get ready for the big day, big Election Day itself. And that it was just an effort to work with as many stakeholders we could to get this bill crafted. It allows pop-up locations for voting. It allows the tribes to reach out to the county audit or the county elections administrator requesting an election location within the tribes. And the goal is just to be able to expand voting and access and make it easier for people's voice to be heard.
All right, thank you, Representative Frederick. I have 2 people who've signed up to testify, Nicole Freeman and Michael Stanberger. Nicole Freeman, would you like to come forward, just identify yourself for the record, and then proceed with your testimony? Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Nicole Freeman, Office of the Secretary of State. I want to say thank you to Representative Frederick for bringing us House File 558 today. Early voting provides additional flexibility for voters who wish to vote in person, allowing them to stop in when it's convenient for them during the 18 days before Election Day. It gives them the peace of mind knowing that their ballot was accepted then and there, and if there are any issues, they can correct them on their ballot. Not only is this process advantageous to voters, but it also streamlines the administration of voters before Election Day. The safeguards and checks and balances in our system that exist on Election Day are all present through the early voting process. The Office of the Secretary of State appreciates the expansion of early voting hours across the state in this bill. And while we applaud this expansion, we ask the committee to consider allowing early voting until 5 p.m. on Monday before Election Day. Voters have told us they prefer voting in circumstances that mirror Election Day conditions. They've done this by turning out to vote absentee in person in high numbers the week prior to Election Day, when local jurisdictions may offer direct balloting. In 2022, 47% of voters who voted in person before Election Day turned out during those last 7 days before election. So to close, thank you again to the committee for hearing this bill, and we hope you will support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole Freeman. Next, I have Michael Stahlberger. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Michael Stahlberger. I'm Director of Property and Environmental Resources for Blue Earth County. In that purview, I am the Elections Administrator for about 38,000 registered voters in the county. I am representing the Minnesota Association of County Officers today, MACO. MACO represents all 87 counties' auditors, treasurers, recorders, and finance officers, and that also includes the elections administrators statewide, excuse me. MACO's platform this year includes a provision on the fair and impartial stewardship of elections. And with that, we look for any opportunities to enhance the efficiency and administration of elections. MACO does support the efficiencies created under House File 558 by implementing early voting. As was already mentioned, under current law, voters think they are voting early when they are truly voting by absentee ballot, and that requires them to complete an absentee ballot application. This process will mimic more of the 7-day direct balloting process, which Ms. Freeman mentioned. It has been gaining popularity in the last several elections. Voters do wish to continue to feed their ballots directly into a tabulator and to receive that validation that their vote has been counted, and early voting will allow us to do that for a greater period of time. We do appreciate all the work that's been put into this bill, especially related to the start of the early voting period. We've had many conversations with Representative Fredericks in regard to that. And the 18 days does appear to be that magic number where administrators can be well prepared and have all of our equipment tested thoroughly for the election while still giving plenty of time for voters to participate in the early voting process. We also very much support and appreciate the closing of the early voting period at 3 p.m. on the day before the election. And while we do recognize that is a busy day for voters wishing to vote early, there are many, many checks and balances and safeguards that election administrators need to complete before they roll over to actual voting on Election Day. And 3 p.m. does give us some very valuable time to complete those tasks to make sure that we have all of our rosters and records in order before Election Day begins, quite early for us election administrators. I will leave with a little concern, and we'd like to continue the conversation regarding the mandatory expanded hours on weekends and into the weeknights. Elections are different. Each election brings its own story and paints its own picture, and we would like to have some flexibility in terms of the hours that are required for expanded early voting. Take, for example, a primary election. We don't have as many voters on Saturdays and these proposed Sundays or weeknights for a primary election where we may not have a lot on the ballot compared to a general election. This bill currently requires the same number of hours for all elections. So we welcome the opportunity to continue that conversation with folks involved in this legislation, but we are very supportive of the premise of early voting, and we look forward to working with the author to continue it moving forward. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you for your testimony. I'm going to turn now to public testimony. I have a note that there's a Mike Dean who wishes to testify. Welcome to the committee. Please identify yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Mike Dean. I'm the Executive Director of Lead MN. We represent the 100,000 community and technical college students in the state of Minnesota. I'm here today to urge you to support House File 558 because it'll make voting more accessible for every Minnesotan, but especially for community college students. Since no excuse absentee balloting was approved a decade ago, more and more Minnesotans vote on the day that is most convenient for them. Then in 2020, early voting exploded because of the pandemic. For example, in our colleges in 2018, 67% of University of Minnesota students voted on election day. That number then shrank to almost 30% in 2020. And at Central Lakes College, students voted at 86% rate in person. And then in 2018, that number went down to 61%. So it shows you the appetite there is for early voting. We hear from students that they want options on when to vote. Some like voting on election day. Others like to find a more convenient time that works for them. That's why we appreciate the section of that allows cities and counties to open up additional voting locations. This clarifies an important part of state statute on whether cities and counties can open up these pop-up locations. In fact, it would allow them to open up these locations at senior centers, and community colleges. In fact, we actually piloted such an idea in Ramsey County in 2018, and that helped 250 students vote and boosted their campus voter turnout by 5 percentage points. That election site brought students together in a room that helped them be prepared for voting by checking to see if they were registered, view a sample ballot, and see who was on the ballot for them to vote for. They could look up information on the candidates, and we assisted them in doing same-day registration if they weren't registered. But most importantly, it created a fun environment that made the voting experience enjoyable that will likely create lifetime voters. After the success of this effort, the vast majority of community college campuses in Minnesota have expressed interest in also having an early voting site on their campus, and this legislation would allow us to do that. We thank Representative Frederick for bringing forward this bill to make voting accessible, safe, and secure in Minnesota.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there other members of the public who wish to testify on this bill? Okay, seeing none, we'll turn to member discussion. Representative Bliss.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's just a logistical question. So right now we do absentee balloting. So you go in, 45 days ahead of election, you fill out your absentee ballot, you drop it in a box, and you go home. I don't know why we would need in-person pre-election balloting if we already have that, but that's beside the point. The question I have is, with the absentee balloting, your precincts and everything's listed on there, and when they open them up, they separate them. How does that work with the in-person early balloting? If you go in and you fill out your ballot and you stick it in the tabulator, how does it know what precinct? Obviously, you're going to have to get the ballot for your precinct, but I guess how do they separate that? Sorry, I should have silenced that.
Representative Frederick.
My answer to that would be the same way that on election day itself. It's exactly the same. You go through the same process, and you cast your ballot and you put your ballot in the tabulator after you voted.
Representative Bliss.
So in my county, Beltrami County, there's several outside precincts that have their own tabulators. They then send those to the county and get counted, and that's where your total for the county comes in. So are you saying that this law will require all the places that have in-person balloting on election day to have in-person balloting early?
Representative Frederick.
The different precincts, I'm sorry, so the different townships and all that stuff.
The goal.
Representative Frederick.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The goal of this legislation is that statewide we establish a system where every voter across the state can vote in person early, 18 days prior to the election.
Representative Bliss, final
Okay,
follow-up.
so back to my initial question. The way it currently works with in-person balloting, and maybe I'm missing, I tried to scan through the bill. The way it works now is I go into my precinct,
Yep.
fill out my ballot, scan it, it goes to the county, it's separated out on the totals by precinct. This precinct voted for Matt 100% of the time. I wish I had more of those, but you know. Anyways, so then it gets reported to the state and it's broken down by precinct. In Beltrami County, I don't know how many townships I have, and I know the city of Bemidji has 5 precincts. How is that broken? Right now, there's only one place in Beltrami County to cast your early ballot, and that's the courthouse. In this bill, are you saying that it goes out? Okay, I saw the light bulb.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's early.
Okay, I think that was an affirmative. Representative Frederick.
Sorry, I think I'm understanding the question now. Thank you. This does not say that you have to set up all of the different locations within the county. That I think quite often what we will see is in the county seat where you will see just that one location. However, it does allow the different pop-up locations, as we've heard testimony, like In my case, in Blue Earth County, if I wanted to vote early in person, I would likely be going down to the courthouse, which is the county seat, casting my vote in person in that early time prior to Election Day, whereon if I voted on Election Day, my local polling location would be or has been at my university. So what this bill does is says that I could show up to my county seat, cast my vote in person if there is the flexibility there that to allow the different locations to be set up if people should want to do that, but is not making it mandatory for all of those different locations to be open in that 18-day period.
I'm going to try one last time, and then I don't care if I get the answer.
Missing the
Okay,
question.
all right.
How does it separate the precincts in the count is my question.
Representative
Mr.
Frederick?
Chair, I would invite the Secretary of State's office down to help with this
Thank you.
question if they'd be willing to come down and answer this one.
Sure. Welcome back to the committee, Nicole Freeman. If you could answer that question. I know it is separated when you vote in person on Election Day as well, but I guess I don't know the logistics of that exactly.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Currently at absentee in-person locations, as would be in an early vote location, the tabulator is programmed to read all of the ballot styles that exist in that county or in that jurisdiction. So some cities are authorized to do absentee voting. So that would also occur here. So those tabulators would read each different ballot style. So you'd still be getting your individual precinct ballot, school district, all of that, the right ballot style still. And then similar to how the ballot board's results are combined but then separated out for reporting, that would also, these results would be combined with the ballot board and then sent up to the state.
Okay, thank you. Why don't you stay up there just in case? Okay, Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Frederick, for bringing forth this bill. So currently, how can people vote in Minnesota right now in statute?
Representative Frederick.
Currently, everyone can vote on Election Day should they want to. If they want to be part of the absentee balloting, they can request an absentee ballot and then vote via absentee. This would keep that system in place, that it should people want to be able to vote absentee. There's other legislation before the legislature on some of those other topics. But this would change it so in that 18-day period, people could show up and cast a ballot in person.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So right now, people can go and do early voting right now in Minnesota.
Representative Frederick.
People can absentee vote right now. What this would do is to create more ways to be able to vote. I think the goal should always be to be as accessible and easy as possible. I think that we should always be trying to get as many Minnesotans to vote as possible, as much as that we can. And so this is just another avenue to help people have their voice be heard.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So right now, people can vote early, but we're trying to make it more convenient. But here's what I'm hearing. We're trying to make it more convenient and make the atmosphere feel better is what I'm kind of getting with this 18-day early voting, so it feels more real, like same-day voting.
Representative Frederick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say that this would allow a person's ballot to be counted right away, where absentee voting, the ballots get set to the side, get counted at a later date. And this does allow someone to be able to go in person, put their ballot in a tabulator, and have it be counted immediately.
Representative Davis.
Okay, thank you. And I won't keep this going too long because I know we press for time. So to me, this is opening up another window. Like in my district, I know for a fact, and I know we can come up with different polls. What I've noticed is polls on this subject about whether people have confidence in our elections, they vary big time, okay? And you can make a poll say what you really want it to say. But in my district, I know I have lots of constituents who do not have confidence in our elections right now, in the integrity of our elections. As good as the Secretary of State's office is doing, they still don't have confidence in it. And I'm wondering Representative, how is this right here, adding one more thing, because my constituents are concerned that, okay, someone can go and do a mail-in ballot and then also show up on voting day, and so they voted twice and they won't get caught. I've had 2 different people that I'm aware of in my district, in my area, that they showed up on voting day and it showed that they had already voted via mail-in ballot. And they had to sign an affidavit saying, no, we didn't do that. So people's confidence is shaken in our elections. And now we're adding one more avenue where my constituents are concerned that someone's going to vote mail-in, someone's going to vote early day, and then they're going to go vote on the day of election, and they're not going to get caught. So with that, Mr. Chair, I thank you for the time.
Yep, thank you. May try to limit the number of follow-up questions moving forward here. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Frederick, for bringing the bill. And I just want to, I think I have a question actually for Michael Stahlberger, because it's really great to have an actual administrator of the thing, but what I heard him say also, and what I have heard in our conversations, is the ability to put your ballot directly in the counter is actually something that, one, people want, and is, when it comes to the confidence that we're talking about, putting it in an envelope, putting it aside, is actually not in people's expectations of what early voting is going to look like. And so I actually think when it comes to Representative Davids, when it comes to people's confidence, the idea that someone can show up on election day or show up a week before and have the same process, the same putting it into the ballot, is actually a confidence, when you talk to voters in your district, actually will add confidence. One of the things I actually wanted to ask you, Mr. Stahlberger, is can you just give us a sense of, because I know we have this process that's sort of evolved over time, an absentee that's then been in person, and we've talked a little bit about the impact that it's had on the voters, but from an election administrator experience, maybe talk about the difference between our current system, 41 days out, and what you do when folks vote in person, absentee, versus what it would look like under this bill.
Michael Stahlberger.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Representative. I will try to keep this brief, but I'll give you kind of a quick rundown on the absentee voting process. So under Minnesota law, we start absentee voting 46 days before the election, and that is a process that's done through envelopes, right? Folks can request a ballot online, they can request a ballot via mail, they can come to our office and fill out an application. It all requires an application to be completed. Once that application is completed, we can distribute a ballot. Those ballots come back through an enveloped process where it is inside a secrecy envelope, which is inside of a signature envelope, which is inside of a mailing envelope. Those are all kept in secure storage for us, and our ballot boards work through reconciling that to make sure that they've been returned by the voter who requested them, and then they're eventually processed the week before the election. That takes us all the way up to, under current law, the 7 days before the election. The 7 days before the election, we switch over to what's called direct balloting. Direct balloting is where we are now allowed to remove the use of envelopes, but we still have to use an application. That's where our voters under our current practices right now are confused, because they're saying, wait a minute, I think I'm voting early. Why am I filling out an application? I want to vote today. And so this bill helps us clean that up, that they're still going to be voting early, but they won't be using an application any longer, because we'll be using the same sort of systems that are used on election day to validate that voter, make sure they're eligible to vote, that they're in the right county, and that they have not voted yet in the election. Once that's occurred, then they're able to feed a ballot directly into the tabulator. And Representative, to get back to your question there specifically, that's exactly what the voter is looking for, because they want that validation that their vote has been counted, that it is in a machine, that it's securely kept, and that it is part of the record for that election. What we've also heard from our voters in this instance is that they really appreciate the ability to have the machine confirm that their votes have been cast correctly, meaning that there wasn't an overvote or there wasn't a stray mark that would make their ballot hard to be read or need to be adjudicated by a ballot board. And those are things that early voting allows us to do that the absentee ballot process by mail didn't allow us to do. Our ballot board at that point can't go back to the voter and ask them what their intent was, because the ballot is secret, of course, and we separate that from who actually cast that ballot. So again, I apologize, probably way longer than you wanted, but when I start talking elections, that's where I go. So thank you.
Are you good?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Representative Greenman. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. clarification, statements have been made indicating that the same checks and balances are present during the, would be present for the early voting. What are the ones that are not present?
Representative Frederick? Would you like some clarification on the question?
Please.
Okay, Representative Quam, could you elaborate a little bit on what you mean?
Well, multiple people have stated that we've got the same verification, checks and balances before as after. I actually want the author to tell me which ones are not the same, which ones are absent.
Do you mean checks and balances, Representative Quam, in terms of the guarantee that the ballots are kept separate when they're fed directly into a machine as opposed to put into an envelope?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Representative Quam.
There are processes in law that require the person can vote, they're in the right precinct, et cetera, et cetera. I would assume the author of this bill would understand all the verification and checks and balances that are the same and different, and I'd like him to illuminate that.
I'm sure he does understand those, Representative Quam. So it sounds like you're talking about checks and balances in terms of ensuring voter eligibility, that type of thing?
All of the current election day checks, balances, verification processes to ensure integrity of the election. But I mean, the author, since he's written this bill, obviously must know that. So if he would let me know.
I'm sure he does know that, Representative Quam. We just
Then why is the chair not letting him actually answer the question?
He asked for clarification. I was a little unclear on the question and wanted to make sure I understood it as well before I turned to him. I'm going to let him answer. I just want to make sure I understand the question. You in a good spot with the question, Representative Frederick?
Sure.
Okay. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our elections are administered in a way that is secure and one that we can have trust in. There is a huge checklist that our county elections administrators go through to ensure the accuracy of our elections. I do want to say that it is important, too, that there is not a single election nationwide whose outcome was determined by any sort of voter fraud. And so we can have faith in our elections. And as leaders, I think we need to make sure we are putting that message out there instead of spreading misinformation or election lies or sowing distrust about our election system. We have seen nationally the harm that causes, including the loss of life, because people who want to sow that sort of distrust within our election systems.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, not one enumeration was made by the author. I asked for specifics and enumeration, not a reading of, talking points.
It's, Representative Quam, it is a very broad general question, what sorts of protections.
And the author cannot even do 1, 2, 3.
Representative Quam, please do not impugn motives to the author here or a lack of knowledge. He is very knowledgeable about this bill. We just want to make sure we understand the question. I want to make sure your questions get answered.
Okay. I'll make it even more simple for the chair. No, because I'm not even getting my first one. This is not a follow-up. You had someone testify, and you even have in your bill that we need shorter hours the Monday before to allow them to the many checks and balances. So obviously, if they have to have extra time to get ready for Election Day for the many checks and balances, they aren't ready for the many checks and balances beforehand, right? Oh, we need to get ready for Election Day because we got many checks and balances. Well, if they already have the same checks and balances, they wouldn't need that, would they? And I'm just trying to make sure that the appropriate activity has been done for this bill, and the author can't enumerate that. Why do I have concerns? because the Secretary of State and the counties, per the president of the County Auditor Association, when asked to report on the verification process for tens of thousands of bad registrations required by the Social Security Administration website for verification, which is publicly visible, and I can send the same stuff I sent 2 years ago when the Secretary of State says, well, that's not true. You know, we've audited it twice. We've got that information, and they're not checking that. We don't follow, we do not follow HAVA. It'd be nice if we followed HAVA since we've got all this time, but we don't follow HAVA. One of 3 states that isn't following HAVA. And we've got tens of thousands of ballots possible because we have tens of thousands of registrations that were bad when using the HAVA verification site.
Representative Kwame,
And they haven't been.
follow-up question.
Well, I haven't gotten the answer to my first question, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
I'd love to get to the
All right.
follow-up question.
Representative Frederick.
So the biggest difference between, and what we've heard from the testifiers here, is that application process, when it comes to that absentee balloting, that is not required under early in-person or on election day. Like when we show up on election day, you don't have to fill out an application. That is the biggest difference between what we had versus what we are going towards with this bill. If Representative Kwame would like a whole laundry list, the checklist that our county elections administrators come through to talk about the security of the equipment, we've already heard about that in committee, but if they need a reminder, that's fine. I'm sure that we have experts in this room that can talk about that checklist that they go through to make sure that our elections are secure.
Sure. I will ask Representative Frederick, and Representative Kwame, I will ask the Secretary of State's office to provide us with a checklist of the checks and balances, and I will make sure it gets provided to committee members.
But there's more than the checks and balances.
Representative Kwame,
Then
I have
haul
the
me out
floor.
of the committee if you're not going to allow us to actually debate the darn bill.
Representative Altendorf, you have a question.
Mr. Chair, you need to let us.
Representative Kwame, stop it.
No, I will not allow you to ignore valid questions.
Representative.
I didn't even get the answer to my first question. You said, oh, no follow-ups. You need to actually cover the bill.
Representative Kwame, you
You
are out of
didn't
order.
talk about all of the things that we got with observers and challengers. You have not talked about the fact that you don't have the balance between the two parties and election judges. You have a lot of stuff that's not explained, and this is not a trivial change. And if you don't care about the quality of the bills that you include, then you really, really are not doing the service to the citizens of the state of Minnesota. And I will not sit here to a travesty of pushing through stuff that there's not the details, the author can't answer questions, and you obfuscate and don't allow us to actually cover
You are
it.
creating motives. You are creating a.
No, I am pointing out the obvious.
Okay.
I am pointing out the obvious.
The motion was to lay the bill over. So Representative Frederick has renewed the motion that House File 558
Sure,
as amended
cut
be
off
laid over for
questions,
possible
ignore
omnibus.
valid
The bill
concerns,
is laid over.
and you just